Hi everyone, Tracy McDonough here again from Mount St. Joseph University with a follow-up to my original presentation, Helping the Hurt in the Classroom. Thank you for all of your questions, lots of really good ones. I tend to do better when I have something to kind of follow along with, so I threw together a couple of slides here just to keep myself organized and to hopefully respond to your questions in kind of topics or sections here. So first of all, there were some questions about the ACEs study and providing some type of maybe update on that information. Now, the original ACEs study was published in 1998, and at that point in time, they just had a sample of about 9,000 individuals from the San Diego area. So since that study, of course, there's been more research. They've expanded it, and a number of states have begun collecting ACEs data via something called the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. Now, I know you won't be able to follow links here in the video, but I will be providing a handout that will have all of those links available in a PDF form so that you'll be able to follow those. So you can look at the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. And this database was used by researchers who conducted a large, and at that point in time, and I say that point in time, 2017, so pretty recent, the largest nationally representative study. They use this particular system, and it's with the CDC. And so what they found was that those individuals identifying as Black or Latino, those with less than a high school education or an annual income below $15,000 were more likely to have ACEs. The original San Diego area study was, I think, 75% primarily white middle class individuals. So we have more information on Black and brown populations. And unsurprisingly, particularly with seeing what the disproportionate impact of COVID, ACEs, we are seeing a disproportionate impact on individuals who are non-white. But a relatively new finding was that multiracial and gay, lesbian, and bisexual individuals really do carry the greatest burden. So essentially, when we're talking about anyone who may be different from our kind of cookie cutter normative demographic, they may be at higher risk for ACEs, and providing some intervention is going to be helpful. In addition to that, somebody asked, is there any one ACE worse than others? Well, the 10 different types of ACEs have been, researched even further, and no one has found that any one of these 10 are significantly more damaging or more impactful than the others, despite, the fact that some of them are quite horrific, like childhood sexual abuse, for example. So none of them were significantly more detrimental. However, there was a slightly more detrimental impact due to humiliation, particularly recurrent humiliation by a parent. And that was correlated with a greater likelihood of adult illness and depression. So that kind of belittling way of interacting with a child, that had a slightly detrimental effect. So here we have the process of communicating with another human being as really sticking with someone. And that's where, as educators, the process of interacting with our students being important, even though it might not feel like you're doing a whole lot, clearly you are. Another question, taking care of ourselves. How do we take care of ourselves, especially if we have in our past ACEs ourselves? Well, there are a number of nice apps out there, Headspace, Calm. One way to utilize some of these is do it efficiently, taking care of yourselves while you're taking care of your students. Everybody take a mindfulness moment, for example. I like, if you could follow the link that I've got there for the mindfulness moments, it's this YouTube video that it has in the form of cards, and they're really kind of short and simple. And so they're different things rather than just music every morning. Some students might start to tune out. They're different things. Providing a safe space, allowing it to be okay to have feelings, yourself too. Modeling that yeah, the stress is kind of getting to me. Maybe a couple of tears are coming out, but I can pull it back together and be okay. I don't have to be fabulous, but I can just be okay. And sometimes being just okay is enough. Um, Showing it to ourselves as well as showing it to our students. That safe space image, I think, is pretty cool. It's part of some interventions, particularly focused on elementary school children. And I'll mention where that link is in the next slide or two. Another possibility would be what's called finger breathing, in a sense, which seems kind of weird. And so the idea is that you take your index finger and you lightly run it along, the outsides of your finger. And as you're going up a finger, you inhale and then hold and then exhale as you're going down the length of the finger. And so you're following, of course, all of your fingers, your hand. And that's something that can be modeled again to students. Something, if you do it while you're doing it with students, it can help as well. Other things like activities that will increase focus, say you're listening to a soundscape of a forest, and then asking the students while they're listening to it for 2 minutes to focus on the different kind of birds. So it helps them to be quiet, helps them to everybody to slow down, yourself as well, and focus on one thing that is calming. So those are some other suggestions I think are helpful. Share the good news. A fellow educator of mine implemented that in some of our faculty meetings one year. And, just start off the day with 3 students or, sharing something really cool that happened over the weekend or that's happening right now in their lives, so start off with something positive. And whatever you decide to do, make it a habit. Again, remember that folks with a background in ACEs, there's been so much unpredictability. Consistency, predictability, those real boring things are very, very safe. And providing some grounding and some really good basis for connection that helps us, that helps them. So making it a habit. If they know what to expect, they can do a better job at working with it and planning for it. And then just for yourself, one example might be to enroll. Yale has free courses. One of them is called The Science of Well-Being. And in this particular course, you engage in a series of challenges that are designed to increase your own happiness, your own ability to be productive, things like that. And they can also help with calming and focus too. So that is one example of a lot of things that are out there. That's self-paced. So you can start here, do a little bit at a time. But whatever you can do also to help strengthen yourself and realize that the time you put into yourself is something that really is going to help tenfold, not for yourself, but also for your students and in your classroom. So encouraging all that. And that kind of connects us to character education. It is happening in the classroom. And again, I do see this as also getting back to the notion of process teaching. How can we model that? How can we be very specific about bringing that in? And I love the example that one of you had with applying the ACEs to some reading that you had to assign for the students. So any of these externalizing activities are really, really good because it also allows the student to kind of examine ACEs stuff without it being so personal to them. Reminds me of an old kind of clinical intervention as a psychologist, rather than asking someone, how do they think that their behavior impacts other people, or what do they think they should do about it? You bring a third person in the room and say, well, if that person was having these difficulties, how would you suggest that they deal with it? How do you think, how would you communicate to them how they're impacting others, things like that? How would you help someone in that situation is the question I have on the screen. And so any type of content that you can bring in and apply some type of ACEs work to it, I think is wonderful because you keep the content. I know classroom time is very precious, but you build upon that by making just a little bit more, adding a little more enrichment to it. So this would be an intellectual way of bringing in this kind of character education. And of course, we have to bring in the emotional piece too, relationships, fostering student-to-student relationships to help them get it. Because, really understanding what ACEs are, how it impacts why they matter is not really an intellectual discussion. And so reading partners I have up there as an example, when my kids were in elementary school, one thing I thought that was really, really cool is when they were kindergartners, they were paired with an older elementary school student. I think it was fifth grade perhaps. And the fifth graders would come in once a week and they'd read with the kindergarten. And they'd be paired with a particular one or two kindergarten students. And what I loved about this was it really was about reading, sure, but it did so much more for the fifth graders than it in the respect to this kind of character education. It became a status, a point of status to be there. And if you weren't there, that you were, like, say, you're going to be missing school or something, you need to contact another school, a student to, sit with your kindergartner. That certainly not the kids sick, but if there's something planned, perhaps. There was also that relationship, that connection. And even though it wasn't expressly identified as such, I very much saw it as a bullying intervention in preventing bullying. Because if you have an older student that connects to another littler person, a more vulnerable individual, they get to know them as a human being, right? And so it's less of this, we should be nice to little kids because it's a good thing to do. It's, oh my heavens, I'm seeing other kids bullying, I don't know, Sam, who was my partner in essence. I don't want them hurting Sam because Sam's important to me now. And so I really believe that would prevent some of the bullying, because it helps kids step up and step in to try to stop that when it's occurring. Because it's really hard for a younger person or a more vulnerable individual to, look up to the bully and say, hey, knock it off. That's a really hard thing to do. But if we've got somebody else who has a higher status intervening and supporting as well, that can be more powerful in stopping it. And also, again, creating this culture of care. So anything where you can get the students to connect with each other, to see each other as other human beings, throw some content in there as well. That's good. But, these emotional, real personal experiences are the ones I really believe are much more impactful. And this gets us to struggling with support from administration. That is really, really hard. And getting a seat at the table is really, really hard. If there are ways that you can present to the board, appeal to emotion, appeal to shared humanity. When I do my talks about individuals with schizophrenia, it's not about giving folks the latest research. It's about playing audio excerpts of these individuals speaking about their lives. And we've done some research on these types of presentations. And by hearing somebody's voice, the emotionality, think about the audio excerpt I included in my previous presentation. That's what connects with us. Anytime you can hear somebody else's voice or see them on video, any way that you can get that content in front of people higher up to help them understand, help them get it, personal stories, make it emotional, make it real, make it matter. Show them that it matters. Certainly, you can also bring in the research, successful implementation. The link I have on the slide right now is a blog spot where you can see where ACEs are being applied in the classroom and different programs throughout the country. And so, you can do your homework, present numbers, show them the money, or show them the money you're not using, or the money you're saving by implementing some of these things. That's a possibility. But if that doesn't occur, another possibility would be to not ask for a seat at the table, but rather perhaps apply for an outside grant, a small grant that could help support a certain initiative. And then once you do the initiative, collecting data on that to provide that information, those numbers. So those are options as well. But as much as the numbers are impactful for people, anytime you can get that emotional connection, that's really where it's at, in my opinion. And we've got some data to support that. So kind of wrapping up here, one of the questions that someone had was about impactful teachers and what were some of the things that were most impactful with Ariel. And for her, it was really about being patient. But while still holding the line, one of the things that she struggled with was getting to school on time as a high schooler. And again, this organizational structure was not as strong as it could have been given her background. And so every time she came in late, people were always very kind with her. But once she, came in late so many times, she did get an after school suspension, or I think it was a before school suspension anyway. But it's really about that attitude. It's going, yep, you screwed up. All right, well, what are you going to do about it? As opposed to having an angry tone or a disappointed tone or a voice. A lot of this emotional language is all nonverbal and really matters because you can still say, hey, you can't do that, but it doesn't mean that, I'm now, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, shall we say. So that holding the line with the patience, with the kindness, is one piece that is very important, and she identified it in particular, that the teachers didn't give up on her. And then the second piece that was also impactful for her was spotlighting the talent, acknowledging the courage it might take to do something. For example, to come up and ask a teacher to reconsider the grade on a particular project. Doesn't mean that you are going to change the grade, but think about that power differential and respecting that. And if that's an individual who grew up in a household where you did not even question, you didn't even ask, the act of even asking is a big deal. So, and I found when I kind of reflect that to my students, gosh, I think it was really tough for you to bring this up to me. I can see this kind of relief that I get it, and that matters. That matters to them. With Ariel, another thing for her, it still is an excellent writer, and in particular, she had one teacher who was her writing teacher and really spotlighted her talent, and that gave her the courage to be more out in public with it and sharing her story while doing that. And that's what, again, impacted the rest of the classroom. So another slide from a bunch that I've found here. And this is, again, particularly interventions for elementary school teachers, but I don't know that this would be limited to this 2x10 intervention where as you can read, teachers focus on their most difficult student or pick out a student who appears to be apathetic. Again, that can be just, I've got too much going on, rather than, the I don't care facade that's in front, but focusing on a particular student for 2 minutes each day, 10 days in a row, and have a personal conversation with that student or check in with that student, or, the idea is giving that particular student just a little teensy bit of time for a sustained period. And you get to know that student a little bit more, and that fosters that relationship, because it's that process of connecting that really, really, really matters. So, of course, I'm back to the slide that I ended with last time, with at the end of the day, it being all about connection. And that's what changes lives. The idea that the slightly more impactful ACE was the experience of being humiliated by a parent, having interaction with another educator, another person, pardon me, who doesn't humiliate them, is very important. Not publicly shaming a student. If you need to intervene, you tone of voice a little softer, more direct, but allowing the student also to save face a little bit. Those things, go miles. They really do matter with students. So I do have some additional resources here. Of course, the CDC website, the strategies for helping students with ACEs, that is the source for those slide images that I have had a couple throughout here, like just the one with the 2x10 strategy. That's where that came from. And then ACEs in Education is a link to that blog spot about various places in the country where they're implementing different versions of some types of ACEs intervention to provide some suggestions for programs that you could implement, how they've other places in the country have done it, and again, what data they may have collected. and incorporated ACEs into the classroom. So again, I very much appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with all of you. If you have any other questions, there's my contact information again. Would love to hear from you. Would love to meet you. And I wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and continue being the great educators that you are.